Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Things I Can't Explain. My name is Casey and I am so excited that you guys are here with me. If you're watching this video right here on YouTube and you do enjoy my content, I would super appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel. I will also be linking my social media in the description box. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok. And then you can also listen to this episode in podcast format over on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music. So tonight's video is one that I'm really excited to talk about, and that is the haunting of Post Malone. Now, this story is so crazy that I remember a few years ago when this was happening, it was actually being talked about on the news, and Post himself talked about these experiences and this whole situation in several different interviews. And to me, it feels like one of the more believable stories. I also do quickly want to mention before we get into the story that this will be the first episode of a new series that I'm starting on this channel where I will be deep diving into celebrities who have experienced paranormal or unexplainable situations at some point in their life. But without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so before we talk about specifically what happened to Post Malone, we have to get into a little bit of a backstory that leads up into what he experienced. Post Malone is not someone who has ever been quoted talking about any type of paranormal experiences at any point in his life. He never had anything happen in his childhood. He's someone that is open-minded to that sort of thing, but he never had any stories of his own until he came in contact with a Dybbuk box. Now, this is where the backstory comes in because this Dybbuk box has so much history. So in 2001, a man named Kevin Mannis purchased an old wooden wine cabinet from an estate sale in Oregon. Now, this cabinet belonged to an elderly Jewish lady who had survived the Holocaust. She personally believed that this box contained a Dybbuk. Now, a Dybbuk is from Jewish folklore that originated in Eastern Europe sometime between the 16th to 18th century. Now, the word Dybbuk comes from the Hebrew Dybbuk, which means to cling or to attach to. It is believed to be a restless spirit that died with a lot of guilt or trauma or unfinished business, and so it clings or attaches itself to a living person. In Jewish folklore, when a Dybbuk does attach itself to a person, it's believed that that person experiences a lot of anxiety, intrusive thoughts, restlessness, persistent nightmares, and depression. And in some cases, it's said that the person can take on a different voice, or suddenly they have knowledge of things that they didn't previously have knowledge of, and can also sometimes experience physical illness. Now, in some traditions, Dybbuks are believed to not only be able to attach themselves to a person, but to an object. And a lot of times that object is also something that came out of grief or trauma or war, which is why it wasn't so unheard of that this Dybbuk would be attached to this wine cabinet because it was connected to someone that had survived the Holocaust. Now, when Kevin purchased this cabinet, he was flipping antiques on eBay, so he was constantly searching for new items. He didn't speak with the elderly lady directly. It's believed that he did speak with one of her family members, specifically her granddaughter, and he was warned not to open this box, but later on he says that when the granddaughter told him this, she didn't seem super dramatic about it. She was serious, and she said that the family didn't want it in their home anymore, to never open it under any circumstances, but that was it. So of course, he really didn't think too much into it and didn't really believe what she was saying, honestly. So Kevin takes the box home and he opens it up pretty much immediately because he needs to be able to sell it. And he said when he did open it, there were a few objects inside. So Kevin said that he found a dried rosebud, a lock of hair, a small statue, a gold wine goblet, and a candlestick, which it seems kind of odd that all of those things would be together in this cabinet, but it still wasn't strange enough to make him fearful of it or think that he had done something wrong by opening it. Now, he didn't describe anything super obvious happening right away. He wasn't seeing anything, but the first thing that started happening with Kevin is he began to experience intense and vivid nightmares. He said these nightmares were extremely invasive and emotionally heavy, and he would wake up the next day so tense and exhausted and just filled with anxiety. Now, Kevin also said that these nightmares were recurring night after night, and around this time, he started to feel incredibly uneasy in his home. Specifically, anytime he was anywhere near the box, he felt like he was being watched. Now, because Kevin was experiencing these disturbances, he decided he was going to get rid of the box, and he gifted it to his mother. Now, I'm not sure why he didn't just list the box to sell it right then and there as he was originally supposed to, but he gifted it to his mom, and immediately she did not like this box. She reported having very intense, vivid nightmares the same night that she received the box. And in her dreams, she was seeing a shadowy figure. So immediately she told Kevin that he needed to get this out of her home and she wanted nothing to do with it. So he took the box back. And this is where the story started gaining traction, because these experiences that Kevin was having were not just tied to him with this box. He tried to give this box to acquaintances and friends several times, and every single person would immediately have the same type of experience and give the box right back to him. No one wanted this box in their home. So eventually, Kevin decides that he's going to seal the box up and kind of lock it away somewhere in his house, but he still felt incredibly uneasy knowing that it was nearby, and his experiences never stopped. Now, after years of dealing with this box, Kevin finally decided to sell it. Now, he was completely transparent. He never said that the box was haunted or cursed or anything like that, but he did give the same warning that he received about there potentially being a Dybbuk spirit tied to the box or in the box. And then he also mentioned the experiences that he was having. And because of this, so many paranormal investigators took notice of this box. Now, eventually, someone purchased this box and it started circulating in the paranormal community. And then eventually, at some point in 2016, Zach Baggins from Ghost Adventures purchased this box. Now, Zach specifically wanted to purchase this box because he was working on his haunted museum that was going to open later in Las Vegas, and he wanted this to be out of just anyone's hands. He didn't want it circulating around. He wanted to keep it somewhere safe, but also have people be able to come and see this box for themselves. So eventually he opened the museum and it was put on display, where it was sealed and enclosed behind glass, and it did have warnings and restrictions for any visitors that were to come by. Now, this is the part of the story where Post Malone comes in. In January of 2018, Post Malone made an appearance on an episode of Ghost Adventures for season 19, and he was just joining the crew to do an investigation at an abandoned meatpacking plant. Now, because he was hanging out with the guys, they gave him his own private tour separately of the haunted museum. Now, eventually, Post Malone came face to face with the Dybbuk Box, and this is where I'm going to insert actual footage of Post with the box, and you can see the terrifying interaction. I think the most unsettling thing about that clip is you can kind of see the actual moment where Post Malone's entire demeanor changes. After that experience, Post later described feeling an immediate cold sensation and just an overwhelming feeling of something being wrong, even though he really didn't know what it was. Now, in the weeks after Post's experience with this box, there was a chain of terrifying events. Individually, each of these events could be dismissed as a coincidence, but what made this different was the timing. Now, in August of 2018, just months after his experience with the box, Post Malone boarded a Gulfstream 6 private jet in Teterboro, New Jersey, and he was heading towards London. But shortly after takeoff, something went very wrong. As the jet accelerated down the runway, two of the aircraft's tires blew off, which can be incredibly dangerous. The pilots could not safely continue this flight, but they had to stay airborne for a while to try to burn off some of the fuel to make the plane light enough to be able to possibly land. At this time, fire and rescue crews had been deployed. The aircraft was placed on high alert, and the landing was treated as a potential crash scenario. Eventually, the jet was redirected to Stewart International Airport, which is in New York, and it has a longer runway and better emergency response capabilities. When the plane finally landed, emergency vehicles and fire crews were ready just in case anything happened. But thankfully, the aircraft landed safely and no one was injured. Aviation experts later emphasized, though, how dangerous a scenario like this is and how catastrophic it could have been. Now, only a few weeks later, in September of 2018, Post Malone's home in the San Fernando Valley was broken into by two armed burglars. According to police reports, the burglars were actively searching for valuables, but a neighbor somehow noticed suspicious activity going on and called the police, and the suspects fled the scene before the police arrived. Now, no arrests were ever made in connection to this, and thankfully, Post was not living in that home at that time. He could have very well have been there when the burglars broke in. Now, just a few days later, after this break-in, Post Malone was involved in a car crash in Los Angeles while riding in his Rolls-Royce. According to police reports and news outlets, a tire on the Rolls-Royce blew out, causing the car to lose control and have a collision with another vehicle. Now, there were no fatalities or life-threatening injuries, but what made that crash even more unsettling is that it was another tire blowout, just like the private jet. Since all of these events happened so quickly and so close together, this is why people connected them to Post's experience with the Dybbuk Box rather than treating them as separate coincidences. He later spoke publicly several times about this string of bad luck, most notably on Late Night with Seth Meyers in 2021, and he described it in a way that he felt as though he had been cursed.
Going hunting with Zach and everything and all that stuff. And we stayed at his museum in Vegas. I love you, Zach. Text me. It's weird because after we opened up this creepy Dybbuk box, I got in a car accident. I got in almost had a plane wreck. My house got broken into, all that type of stuff. But it was just within a month's time. It was really, really odd stuff.
Now, since then, many visitors to Zach's haunted museum have described strong physical or emotional experiences whenever they have been near the Dybbuk Box display. Some report feeling anxiety, nausea, or cold sensations in the room, and a few visitors have said that they felt watched or just incredibly uneasy, especially right after seeing the box. On online forums and social media, there are even some group posts where people have talked about witnessing a handprint on the inside of the glass that holds the Dybbuk box, or feeling like something followed them out of that room. Paranormal investigators who have visited the museum, specifically the Dybbuk box, sometimes describe unexplained temperature drops, electromagnetic field fluctuations, and even occasional EVP captures. Of course, to this day, the box remains in the museum, sealed behind the glass case, but I would love to know what you guys think of this story, not only of Post experiences, but what you really think about the Dybbuk box. Is this something that is kind of psychosomatic, where if enough people talk about having an experience, then your brain kind of tricks you into thinking that you're having experiences of your own when you're near this box? Or do you really believe that this box could be cursed or haunted and that something attached itself to Post when he made contact with it. I would love to hear your theories, and also, if you follow me on Instagram, you can DM me directly if you have any unexplainable stories of your own, especially if you have visited the Haunted Museum. I would love to hear your stories to hopefully read them on future podcast episodes. But for now, that is all for tonight's episode. I appreciate you guys so much, and I will see you next time.